Hello, a really warm welcome to everyone for this Shoulders 101 workshop. I'm Sophie Till and co-founder of the Till Project. So this information is really here for all of us. It's an amazing body of knowledge. You can sort of think of it like a library of information. And it doesn't matter what age, stage, or level, or style of playing we're involved with. It's here for every one of us with wherever we've got to in our own personal process with our playing. So let's get into the shoulder stuff. I don't think there's a single string player who hasn't had shoulder issues at some point. And that can make the shoulder question seem really complicated, but happily, actually, the solution's extremely simple. So as with all aspects of our playing, we really want to look at how we move in daily life. So if we think about daily life for a second, our brains actually are choosing patterns of movement all day, every day, and extremely complex ones. And we refer to that as physical logic. We are moving in a way that makes sense to us during the day, such that we feel comfortable and at ease. So we want to study that, and then we actually want to take that same physical logic over to our playing, even though the playing is a very specialized activity. So the first thing we're going to do is give ourselves a blueprint sensation, a very simple thing that we do in daily life where we can actually observe how the body is functioning. So first task, just go around your room, touch some different objects. If you're sitting down, you can just kind of move around and touch some things, and just walk around for a few seconds, like touching different heights of things, kind of slowly in front of you, behind you. And chances are you didn't even notice your shoulders at all. It didn't occur to you to even think about them. Okay, let's try something different. Do the same thing, move around your room. You can touch the same objects, different objects. And this time, lead that movement from your shoulder. So here we go, just have a few seconds doing that. So when we lead from the shoulder, first of all, we notice, if you do this with kids, they start laughing. We notice that it feels pretty silly. We also notice that it feels wrong. We essentially disabled the first movement really in a finger snap of time. So this gives us two questions and two answers. We have to know what role each part of the arm plays, and we have to know which part of the arm is in charge of the movement, or which part is the engine, and therefore which other parts will be following. And the car provides a really great analogy for this. So if you open the hood or the bonnet of your car, there are all these different parts in there. You've got the fan belt and the oil and the water and the radiator, whatever's going on in there. But when you go to drive the car, you turn the key or you push the button. We're not driving the car from the fan belt. That would be really strange. But we do have to have a fan belt, and we have to have all those component parts not only there and complete, but ready for action. But then there's one engine, there's one initiation for that. So let's look at the design of the arm. We've got this we are brilliantly designed. So anytime we get stuck on something, we have to remember that. This amazing system of fulcrums from large to small. So we've got this large shoulder, medium-sized elbow, sort of smallish kind of wrist, and then these very delicate fulcrums in our fingers. So when these are all working, we are designed to do things that have tremendous power as well as tremendous delicacy. Let's look at now who's in charge. So clearly the shoulder didn't feel so good in charge, and it's not good when it's initiating because it's a large, slow muscle and it fatigues immediately. The fingers, if I try leading from the fingers, that feels really strange. And if I try leading from the wrist, that also feels really strange. So the forearm is the initiator. Doesn't matter how small the movement is or how large the movement is. We're going to come to that later. The forearm is the initiator, which means that the shoulder is simply following in perfect proportion and synchronicity. So let's go back to our first exercise where we're just touching things around wherever we are, and just notice this time how the forearm is leading and how your shoulder's just following. It's interesting to notice too that if you go to touch something down below, this will go with you. And if you touch something that's higher up, this will go higher up too. We tend to be a little bit neurotic about letting the shoulder come higher, or indeed sometimes going lower. Okay, so let's take this towards the playing a little bit. So let's talk about a rather subtle problem that we can, all of us, forget because there are so many complex actions going on and things going on above our instruments. You know, we've got fingers here, got this bow doing this stuff, we've often got a conductor, we've got music, we've got colleagues, there's a lot of stuff going on. But let's have a look at the fulcrum of the feet and the sit bones. So just pop your left hand on your right shoulder, on this kind of shoulder area, and just let your right hand swing a little bit back and forth. And what I want you to do, if you're sitting, you're going to feel this in your feet. Sorry, you're going to feel this in your sit bones. And if you're standing, you're going to feel this in your feet. Just close your eyes and notice how your body is moving over the fulcrum of your feet or over the fulcrum of the sit bones. There's a lovely, gentle responsiveness going on over those feet and sit bones. So take that out for a second, just stop that from happening. And the first thing that we notice is that the shoulder freezes. We actually feel pretty robotic, and the shoulder feels kind of clunky, and there's no sense of momentum, power, or energy there. So this gives us a really crucial piece to our playing, whether we're standing or sitting, and Rachel's going to talk about this more, particularly in the orchestral setting. Every movement that we make with our arms is calibrated over the fulcrum of the feet or the sit bones. And the moment that's gone, we really experience that in the shoulders with that stuck, frozen feeling. It's so important that we keep this in mind. Things become so complicated and also emotionally complicated up here that we can lose that crucial piece upon which everything else is being built and is actually dependent for its freedom and its power. So fulcrum of the feet, calibrating, or the fulcrum of the sit bones. Okay, let's jump this information in a basic way over to the left side and then over to the right side. So just pop your right hand on your left shoulder area and just let your left arm, if you're a cellist you can go this way, bass player too, bob up and down here. And just move that left arm around. And what you notice is that underneath your hand, there is a lot of movement, a lot of responsive movement going on in there. If I move around in a really small way, I can feel it's very delicate. And if I move around in a larger, more obvious way, I can feel the size of that changing. So take that out for a second. Just stop that from moving and try moving the left arm. And what we notice immediately is the left arm can't move. It feels really heavy, feels kind of lugubrious, and it feels stuck. So this basically invisible world of responsive movement that's happening under our instrument or behind our instrument is absolutely crucial to the freedom that we are all looking for in those left arms as we're playing. Let's jump over to the right side. So I think one of the main questions that comes up with the right side is that a lot of us are coming to the bow arm side of things with a pretty complex picture of who does what and when. So we can often find ourselves thinking about the arm in sections. But if you think about trying to cook dinner, if you were trying to cook and think of your arm working sections, like imagine trying to cut a loaf of bread and thinking, well, okay, this is my wrist and this is my shoulder. We soon realized that actually we were completely congested in the head and we couldn't actually think about making dinner at all. So playing music is exactly the same. All of us want to be free to express the music, to enjoy the music. And so if we are thinking outside, or if we're asking the body to move outside of its normal physical logic, we are essentially congesting that whole process, and it's no wonder we have a hard time listening to what we're doing, and it's also no wonder that it becomes actually extremely stressful. So let's just swing this right arm, just let it come up to your shoulder and down to your side, and you realize that you aren't thinking about how it unfolds or folds up. It's just doing it on its own. So I'm going to turn this into a wave. It's a little bit easier to show. So if I wave big and you're standing on the far side of the parking lot like this, you can see that there's a lot of response here, right? The upper arm and the shoulder are really pretty visible. Now, if we're in the cinema and I spot you down the row of seats and I'm like, oh, hi, and I make a sort of secretive way, the smaller fulcrums suddenly become more visible. But the engine never changed. All of that was the forearm, just the proportion of response through those other fulcrums changed, which is very logical, according to the size of the movement. And this is what enables us to do these incredibly delicate strokes and to have a ton of power. So if I grab a fiddle, if I play, or all of that is forearm with everybody else following in proportion, and that shoulder just free to follow to the point where we don't even feel it. It's very easy for the brain to process that because it is our normal movement. So I'm going to hand over to Nora, who's going to talk about relaxation, and then Sally, who's going to look at the pedagogy side of things with kids, and Rachel, who's going to look at orchestral playing.
Hi everyone, good to see you. It's wonderful to be with you. So I'm Nora Crone. If you don't know me, I'm a violist in New York. And my topic for our shoulder presentation is why relaxation can actually be problematic, which is maybe a somewhat controversial idea. And obviously we're going to examine how that concept comes up, particularly with the shoulders. And we're going to do a left arm example and then a right arm example. Okay, so relaxation. It's a word that comes up a lot, especially in the more, we could call them humane approaches to musicianship, but also, in daily life. And it always comes up with a very positive connotation, right? And I just want to start by saying that feeling emotionally and psychologically grounded and at ease around the instrument is great, okay? And in fact, some of the habits of sort of squeezing the shoulders inward as sort of a general phenomenon can just be a symptom of stress and anxiety, okay? And so if you notice that, it's completely fine to just take a deep breath and, feel your feet and your sits bones and just allow your shoulders to uncrumple, all right? So that's all fine. I just wanted to start with that caveat. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, so once we have that context of alertness and ease in our approach to the instrument, we do have to remember that playing is an activity. So because it's an activity, it requires that our bodies, and that obviously includes our shoulders, be appropriately active and available for use. Otherwise, it's kind of like trying to run a race or cook a meal or something like that while we're lying on the couch, which is obviously not going to work. So really, relaxation is not actually conducive to the act of playing in general. And actually, it can legitimately injure you. So for example, if I tried to hit a punching bag with my wrist relaxed, I could break it, right? I could break my hand, I could break my wrist. Performing that action safely requires all of the elements involved to be doing their part, as Sophie was, explaining in her portion. And I hope you'll see how this part of the presentation is really just a continuation of the concepts that Sophie spoke about in the first part. So we need all of these elements to be doing their part appropriately, okay? And the same is true for playing. When we deactivate parts of the body, other parts are going to take over, and they're going to do jobs that they aren't designed to do, and that always gets us into trouble. Okay, so it's true that some of us are coming from habits of tension with the shoulders or otherwise kind of unhelpful overactivation, which can come from many different sources, right? Including maybe not really understanding how to hold the instrument, for instance, which is something that Rachel's going to talk about a little bit in her part of the presentation. But you know, what often happens is, rather than, because we don't know how to solve these underlying issues that are causing the inappropriate shoulder overactivation, we often just get this one-size-fits-all recommendation to relax. But what happens, which is what Sophie was talking about, when we relax the shoulders, what we're doing is we are immobilizing them. We are taking them out of commission. We're taking them out of that overall picture that really needs to include them, needs to include all of the elements, okay? And as Sophie was explaining, both of our shoulders have really important roles in our playing. Okay, so let's move on to a specific example in the left shoulder. And this is actually a personal example for me. It comes up for a lot of people, but you know, I experienced it myself. So I, for many years, dealt with my left shoulder raising to support the instrument. Okay, so that was the first thing, which Rachel's going to talk a bit about. And with my elbow pulling unnecessarily to the right. And both of those things are pretty common issues for violists and violinists. But in my case, because I wasn't aware of what was causing these things, or what I could do instead, the only response that I had was to relax my shoulders, just relax the shoulders, relax. And what I was actually doing with my left shoulder was I was deadening it or freezing it. And what I learned in the process of recovering from a subsequent injury, which by the way was focal dystonia. And if you are curious to know more about that, you're welcome to get in touch with me. I'm always happy to tell people more about that experience. But during that process of recovering from this injury with Sophie, you know, I learned that since the finger, hand, and forearm unit needs to be in a precise location for the finger itself actually to function well and to feel supported by the structural line behind it, the shoulder has to also be 100% available and responsive to the movement of the forearm, bringing the hand and fingers from place to place in order for that playing finger to feel really good. So we're going to examine this in action right now. We're just going to repeat what we did with Sophie, where you're throwing your arm to different things. This time though, how about you try landing on a finger? So just land on a finger and maybe do both arms, just so you can feel both of them and if there's a difference between the two of them. But so, okay, we're throwing our arms to different places. It can be on your body, it can be on furniture, whatever. And what's happening is the brain is aiming at a spot. It sends the finger, hand, and forearm unit to that spot in a way so that it can remain aligned as a unit. And the result is that the finger that's touching just feels really supported, okay? And the shoulder, its role is just to follow along in perfect proportion and synchronicity to the forearm. Okay, so let's do that same thing again where we go around touching things, only this time try relaxing your shoulder as you do it and see what you notice. So the arm feels really heavy, right, when we do this. It feels very strange. It also actually really affects our range of motion. Okay, so obviously relaxing is not going to be very helpful in this context. Let's walk this over to the instrument now, so just so you can feel it a little bit more specifically there. And what we're actually going to do, this is going to feel very strange, we're going to plop the instrument onto your right side first, okay? And the reason that we do that is because most of us have not as much conditioning, okay, on this side of our body when it comes to the instrument at any rate. And if you're a cellist or a bass player or something, you can just put the instrument on the other side of your body. Okay, so we've plopped the instrument to our right side. Our shoulder area has received the instrument. And we're just gonna feel underneath with our opposite hand. So again, the instrument's on your right side, you're feeling underneath here with your left hand. Okay, and now you're gonna move this arm to different places. And what do you feel here? Can you feel that movement underneath, that proportionate synchronous movement in the shoulder? All right, so now we're gonna switch to the left side and we're gonna do the same thing. Feel that shoulder area receive the instrument. Take your right hand now and put it under here and just feel around, and you're just gonna move that left hand from place to place and see what you feel. And the first question is, does it feel different? Do the two sides feel different? And if so, you can actually go back and forth a little bit. And when you go and repeat it on the left side, you can even do it sort of imagining like you're doing it on your right side. And sometimes that brings the two kind of closer together. So basically, to sum up, the shoulder is not relaxed, right? It is an active participant. It is a responsive participant rather than the engine of the movement, which is what Sophie was talking about, right? And it isn't active in an inappropriate way, but it also isn't relaxed or dead, okay? Let's look at an example in the right shoulder now. Okay, so join me on a thought experiment with this. Imagine that you had to pull a really heavy rope across your body. All right. If you're a cellist, it's going to be more like this across your body this way. For us violinists and violists, it's going to be more diagonally. Okay. And now try pushing a bag of flour up a ramp, like a heavy bag of flour like this. Then cellists and bass players, your ramp is flat, unlike ours. Okay. So in both of these cases, the pull or the push, obviously you need your shoulder. Okay. Now try relaxing your shoulder and try doing the same thing. And it's almost impossible, right? Especially with the push, right? We have like no power this way. So clearly, in order to do either one of these things, we really need our right shoulder to be available and following along in proportion and synchronicity, okay? We also obviously need that when we use the bow, especially if we want to play with any kind of power. So let's look at another kind of slightly more specific example of what can happen when the right shoulder relaxes. All right, another thought experiment. Try pulling an imaginary light switch kind of in front of you and to the left like this. And if you can see my right shoulder, what do you notice happening in my shoulder when I do it? So the shoulder comes up. Right? I'm not lifting it. That's very important. I'm not lifting it up, but it is just coming up naturally as a proportionate response to my forearm moving up and across my body. So this is the same as on the bow, get into the frog. So here's how we're going to experience this. Hold your bow with your left hand, okay? And just pretend that the light switch is at the top of your bow. Like that. Okay, now relax your shoulder and try and do the same thing. Pull that imaginary light switch. And what happens? The wrist breaks, right? So what we've done here is we've effectively disabled the arm, right? So if the power and the control that we need in the right arm come from having this whole finger, hand, and forearm unit aligned, as we experienced with our rope, our heavy rope, and our bag of flour, this way. If the shoulder doesn't follow along and the upper arm doesn't follow along, this whole unit, this finger, hand, and forearm unit, can't arrive at this spot up here intact without that shoulder. Okay, if we relax it, this is what happens. So because it can't, the wrist breaks, and there goes all of our power and control, right? Okay, so I hope that those were two helpful examples, more specific examples about why relaxation is not so helpful with the shoulders. And basically, in sum, relaxation is an evil word and you should never relax ever again, which is obviously a joke. But what I'm hoping is starting to become clear is that when things operate appropriately in our bodies during an activity, as we experienced in the first part of the presentation when Sophie had us just touch things and realize that we weren't even aware of what our shoulders were doing, we can be active but also feel at ease in our bodies and minds, okay? And that's actually really what the word relaxation is trying to achieve, that sense of ease, okay? This is just a more sensible way to approach the issue. So thanks everybody for watching, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Hello, I'm Sally Ann Anderson and I'm speaking from Manchester in the UK. And I'm here to talk about how we might discuss shoulders or work with our students on this topic of shoulders. It's been really fascinating having this shoulders workshop on my radar for the last month or so, and discussing it as a TIL project team has been really enlightening. I feel like I've developed a stronger image of the shoulders and their role, and thinking of the shoulders as the gateway between the body and the arms has been really helpful to me. My personal experience is that my shoulders were one of my blind spots, like they were invisible or numb and not really on my radar. If I did notice them, it was because they didn't feel that great, at which point I think my main go-to was just relax, and we've just learnt about the downsides of just going to the relaxed position for our shoulders. So why might my shoulders have been a blind spot for me? I think on reflection, one of the reasons is that they're really difficult to see. If we try and look at them now, we can notice that it's a little bit awkward, and it's a challenge just to see them, and it's especially difficult to see their movement without using a mirror. They're very much underneath and out of our eye line. If we are violin and viola players, we then further block the view of the left shoulder by putting the instrument on top of it. So I really enjoyed chatting to my students about shoulders this term, and I've simply asked, when you play the violin, do your shoulders move? And some of my students have said yes, and some of my students have said no, and some of them have said the right one does, but the left one doesn't. And it's been really interesting discussing their answer and working out together what is actually going on. So it's a great thing to introduce the shoulders from the start. It's not something I've always done, but I am really enjoying doing it. And what we need to do is expose our pupils to the role of the shoulders as followers of the forearm. Say that again, the role of the shoulders as followers of the forearm. We want them to feel that the shoulders will be adjusting to every move the forearms make, but we don't want to become so fixated with the shoulders that they end up trying to initiate movement. We also want our pupils to realise our shoulders can't be good followers if we aren't calibrating our instrument playing movements over the fulcrums of our feet. Our bodies must be constantly awake and alive and able to adjust to what is going on above the feet. And I hope we will get a chance to experience this through some exercises. So one of the things I like to do with a group of 60 children, a group of 30 children, 2 children, 1 child, is to say hello to the shoulders. And I simply do this by massaging the left arm with my right arm, and we massage the front of the shoulder and the tops of our shoulders and the backs of our shoulders, and we notice what a really big area it is. Please feel free to join in. And we then notice the right arm and see how the right forearm is initiating this massage movement and the right shoulder is following. And we also notice that our bodies are alive to this movement. Let's try and do what we don't want and keep our bodies statue still as we do this. And then let's add in the possibility of our bodies to adjust over the fulcrums of the feet. And we'll notice how different it feels when we allow this to happen. Swap arms, and if I was doing this with a group of children, I might have some nice calm music on so that we can really find a nice calm atmosphere so that we can focus on what we're doing. Again, feeling how the left arm is adjusting from the shoulder as we massage this shoulder here. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to introduce the forearms as the leaders, and I like them to find their forearms by tapping their elbow and then massaging their forearm. And then if you do the tapping elbow thing, they sort of get the right area. So then we tap our other elbow and we massage that forearm. And great forearm leading movements are waves, and lots of children like to wave at you. Other forearm leading movements are pretending to lift weights. We can really feel we're lifting those from our forearms. And another lovely forearm leading movement is to swing backwards and forwards like this, and also to go out and in from this position. And as we're doing all those movements, we can see that our bodies are constantly adjusting over our feet. Let's turn the bodies off and feel how it feels. And then let's let the bodies adjust, and we can feel how much nicer that is. If our bodies freeze, our shoulders freeze too. So let's look now at holding the violin and what goes on this left shoulder. This is where the sponge or shoulder rest is going to rest, so we really want to alert our students to this area. I do this by calling it the shoulder drum, and we tap rhythms here. Ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, and they would tap that rhythm back. So then we place our sponges alone on this area, or if you've got a shoulder rest, place your shoulder rest alone on this area. I've really enjoyed this term, asking my students to place their shoulder rests, and it's been fascinating to see what they do. Some of them pop it this way round, some of them pop it this way round, and some of them pop it this way round. This really is a crucial piece of knowledge, so we really do have to explain to them what's going on under their instruments. So a way of thinking about this concept is that the eyes are the window to the brain, and this activity, doing this, will explain to the brain where this object is going to rest, because this object is under the violin and therefore we can't see it. So we have to do exercises like this so that we can see what's going on, and then our brain has a chance to build up a logical and accurate picture of how the sponge or shoulder rest interacts with the shoulder area. So with this in place, we can now do some movements where we lead from the forearm, like putting it on our head, and we can see the shoulder goes up and we can see the sponge goes up. Our arm on the other shoulder, and we can see how the sponge and shoulder adjusts. We can swing our arm and we can see how the shoulder and sponge adjusts. And if we can just do this thing to highlight how important it is that our bodies are always adjusting, let's do this swinging movement with our bodies still. Let's do the movement onto our heads with our bodies still, and keep those bodies still. And we're doing all that movement, and now let's open the body to movement again and feel how much more free our shoulder is. So then I would repeat that exactly the same exercise, except for with the shoulder rest attached to the violin. I would be swinging and I would be doing all those things. And we would be obviously adjusting our bodies over our feet. So let me introduce you to a new concept maybe, which is the 4 axes of movement. In everyday life, we use higher and lower movements, we use in and out movements, we use side to side movements called lateral movements, and we use our rotary movement. And it's a combination of these movements that allow us to move healthily. If we are to move healthily when we play our instruments, we therefore need to use a nuanced combination of these 4 movements. So in order to expose our students to these movements, we do something called left arm gym. And I thought we could experience a left arm gym exercise together whilst observing how the forearm leads, with the shoulder following in perfect proportion and synchronicity. So here we go. These are the movements we're going to do. We're going to do our higher and lower that looks like this. And I hope that anyone playing the cello will be able to adapt that movement as the fingers moving higher and lower from the string. We're going to do our lateral movement, which we can start off by doing from scroll to nose, and then once we get it onto our instrument, our lateral movement looks like this. Then we can do our out and in movement like this, And we can do our rotary movement where we catch the rain and dump the rain and catch the rain and dump the rain, and then we can finish with a wave. So with our students at In Harmony Liverpool, we do a lot of left arm gym, and I thought it would be fun to experience one of those exercises today. And I'm going to pop on a backing track and I'm going to take you through all those movements. And of course, we are going to be thinking of forearms that lead and shoulders that follow and bodies that adjust. 3 things that we are really thinking about. Number 1, forearms that lead, shoulders that follow, and bodies that are constantly adjusting. I'll just pop on the backing track and then we can do this exercise together. So here we go. Starting with our higher and lower. And off we go with higher and lower, and higher and lower, and higher and lower, and higher and lower. Scroll, nose, scroll, nose, and now turn the string. Slide with lateral movement, back again with lateral movement, out and in. Rotary movement, catch the rain and dump the rain, catch the rain and dump the rain, catch the rain and dump the rain, and give a little wave. Let's try that one more time, and as we do it, let's really think of number 1, forearms leading, number 2, how the shoulders can follow, and number 3, how the body can adjust. I'll just put the music on again. Be aware of your feet. Feel nice soft knees, and higher and lower to start. Higher and lower, higher and lower. Focus on your forearm and your shoulder. And now lateral movement, will slide up the instrument, slide back again. Feel the forearm moving and the shoulder following, and out and in. Our rotary movement. Again, our bodies are adjusting all the time, and we can finish with a wave. The nice thing about finishing with the wave is that is the beginning of our vibrato, so we're adding in that movement. Anyway, that is what we would do at In Harmony with the Rocks, and I think it would now be really nice to just briefly touch on the right arm. And we've done a lot of swinging of our arms today in this session, and this is basically a lovely way of showing the children how the forearm leads, the shoulder is following, and the body is adjusting. So we do this to a lovely backing track by the wonderful Thomas Gregory and Vermouche, and we basically call it Down, Up. And you may be adjusting your bodies and doing this along with me right now, I don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop on a video of our children at In Harmony doing Down, Up. So you can see a group of kids really moving their forearms, following with their shoulders and adjusting their bodies. So I'm going to finish with the video, so you won't see me again, but I just want to say thank you for listening. And also I think the 3 main takeaways are: number 1, that the forearm leads, number 2, that the shoulder follows, and that number 3, we are always adjusting to our playing movements over our feet. And then hopefully that's a 3-part recipe for happy shoulders. Okay, bye-bye.
Everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm a violinist. I live in Edinburgh in Scotland. Following on from what Sophie, Nora and Sally have been talking about with shoulder issues, I'm going to sort of go from the point of view from playing in orchestra and shoulder issues in orchestra. And we can often get comfortable playing solo repertoire, practicing standing, playing chamber music where we have our own part and we have a little bit more, we feel we have a bit more control over how we're sitting, for example. We can feel really comfortable there and then get plonked into an orchestral situation and we feel we have to solve issues very quickly to start with. And we can feel that suddenly it just feels very, very uncomfortable and we end up with often pain in the shoulders and fatigue, especially in that back inside that shoulder blade there. And it feels, all wrong compared to what we've been doing standing. So there are obviously reasons for it, and the good news is that we can change those things pretty quickly if we know where to start. The overarching issue, of course, is we go back to what we've discussed quite a lot in this workshop, which is that we need to have the necessary support to calibrate the movement of the arms over the fulcrum of the feet when standing, but when we're sitting we need to transfer that to the sit bones in the pelvis. So the sit bones become like our feet when we're standing, so that our arms can move freely, the shoulders aren't having to grip. So you may know what, of course, what a pelvis looks like, but the actual bones in the bottom of the pelvis, the sit bones, they're rounded, but they do have quite a bit of surface area there for adjustment. And they have specific parameters, that adjustment, that specifically relate to the movements in the arms. So you can feel, once you're sitting down, you can feel yourself moving over those sit bones, but very, very specifically, exactly where they should go is really, really important. So if our arm is swinging like this, then, of course, the sit bones aren't moving first, which we end up in a muddle as well, but that the forearm is leading that movement over the sit bones so that we feel free and supported from underneath. So that's a really, really the overarching issue that we need to deal with when we're sitting in orchestra. And of course, we're also dealing with various other pollutants in orchestra that can make us feel very uncomfortable very quickly. And those things can be, of course, sharing a desk. So we're on either the left or the right side of the desk. And of course, we can do strange physical things to accommodate our desk partner or the other person next to us, or even in front or behind, so that we end up twisting in order to accommodate those people, either to avoid a scroll, or actually sometimes we want to just lean in order to feel part of the section, orally and physically. So we end up twisting or pushing up with the body. Also sight lines, whether you can see the conductor or your section leader or whoever you need to be seeing, or even the music, you might be able to see the music properly. And the main thing that we need to start with, I think, is the seat height as well. We can be trying to play over those sit bones, but if our seat height is incorrect, then it's really not going to work at all. We may end up with this feeling that the torso is sinking a little bit, unable to access that support from the sit bones. So if we sink down, we're often having to push up with the arm or grip more with the chin, and then you end up with a lot of tension going on in here. So the seat height is really important to start with. That could be the first port of call. So I have I don't have them here with me because they're in orchestra, but these sort of thin but firm pieces of foam that I can take away and add to as I want, and I put them inside a cushion cover. And if the chair is not high enough, then I tend to use quite a few of them actually, because it's usually not high enough. And that surface needs to be flat and fairly firm. And my hip angle needs to be at a narrow angle. I'm not sure if you can see here, but you can't see much anyway. But as long as my knees aren't up, and I'm also not hyperextending that angle as well, so that I have enough space to swing my arm. So the right arm does travel close to the leg, but if I'm at the correct seat height, it won't be crashing into that leg, which can be, of course, a problem a lot when you're playing on the E string in orchestra. And if we're collapsed a little bit in the torso, you feel like you have to push up in order to avoid that E string. It's really, can be really disconcerting. So the seat height is the first thing that we need to correct. So yeah, the issue with twisting the body in order to accommodate, again, we can really adjust that within ourselves. So we don't need to rely so much on others or equipment or whatever to sort that out. But it can feel like quite a big adjustment, or it can feel quite a small adjustment, but very, very necessary adjustment, that we're not twisting with the torso. We can move the angle of the seat in order to make sure that the whole torso, legs and everything are moving together, so that we're not just independently twisting that upper body. I tend to sit sort of a little bit at the front of the seat on the corner, slightly on the corner, just so I've got a little bit more freedom. Sorry, I'm just collapsing everything here. So I've got a little bit more freedom for bow movement, as well as movement over those sit bones. Another key thing to remember, especially for the left side, is that we need to remind ourselves that this shoulder area and the torso receives the instrument. Sometimes in orchestra, it's really easy to play forward and feel that the shoulder comes forward to meet the instrument. And I've found that a super helpful idea when things are feeling a bit sort of up in my body. I remind myself that this needs to be all very active and buoyant. It's a really buoyant feeling. And again, remind yourself of those bones stacking on top of the sit bones, and the parameters of how much we move over the sit bones. I find it's helpful to try it fast without the instrument and just see what those parameters are. So I don't go too far, I don't go too little, I don't get stuck forward, because that can be really hard to get yourself back again, can feel really uncomfortable at the heel. So that there is, a real limit this way as well. So you might find it's more or less than you expect, and then try it with the instrument. It's a really comforting feeling, actually, so you feel like the arm isn't having to do so much, actually, because it's really supported from underneath. So yeah, if you find yourself in orchestra and you're struggling, the first protocol is the seat height. Is it right? If I feel I've got enough space for my arm to move closely to my body without crashing. Making sure that I'm not twisting with my upper torso to avoid or to lean in or whatever. That I'm receiving the instrument over here, and that this feels alive underneath the instrument. And all of those things, if you have this sort of little checklist in your mind as you're playing, it can be really helpful just even to have a little list of things in your violin case sometimes, to remind yourself what you need to check very quickly before you start a rehearsal, or in the middle of rehearsal when you have a couple of bars rest. So hopefully that's helpful. See you soon. Bye.
So a common question that comes up is the experience of the instrument wanting to swivel off the shoulder, where we feel like this is going to happen all the time. So when that's happening, what's usually the case is that the head actually isn't registering this part of the instrument. And that means both the top part of the instrument, this piece of the chin rest, and everything underneath. So if I turn this way and I'm not registering, my head, my brain isn't registering the entire instrument, everything here, everything under here, and right across here, then what happens is the head starts to adopt a focus in this direction, and the back part of the instrument isn't engaged anymore. So it is free to swivel. But when the head is actually registering all this stuff to the left and we really mean all the stuff to the left, then it can engage the whole instrument and relate to the whole instrument, and then I've got that stability, and there's nothing really here to swivel because there's a connection and a relationship in that part of the instrument. So a quick way to feel this, if you want to explore it further, is to make the pillow hands. We often use this, and to put your head on your hands. And what you experience is that it's a lovely soft feeling. Your brain is actually registering a two-way relationship. It's actually feeling that the hands are supporting the head and the head is relating to the hands, rather than inanimate surface, dump the head on top, which makes the head feel very heavy. The other thing that we notice is when the head is in this relationship, if you actually pay attention, you can feel the whole area. The head is really registering all of the hands in a complete way rather than a piece of the hands like this. So the head has a two-way relationship with the hands, just like on the chin rest. It's like a head support and a head rest in this mutual relationship that takes the entire scenery into account rather than a piece of the jaw or a piece of the chin rest. So the next question that came up was, what role does the left arm really play in holding the instrument? So I've dug this bottle out of the recycling. A wine bottle will work really well. Actually, empty is better than full because otherwise it's very heavy, or a long umbrella. So if I put the bottle in my right hand, what we can feel is that the right forearm is supporting the entire bottle. There's nobody else helping. Now, the moment you add the left arm, what you notice, what you can feel very quickly, is that the right arm adjusts how much it needs to do because it senses through the sensitivity of the fingers that the left arm is also present and that they are now sharing the workload. Then what we can realize is that you can move that left hand and arm any way you like. Doesn't matter where you put it. So as you move it around, that left forearm here is still lending its support to the holding of the bottle. So what we register is that the brain really doesn't care which part of my hand is touching the bottle to do that. I'm not dependent on a piece of my thumb or a piece of my index finger at all. It's really the forearm plus something touching in order to make that work. So what we realize when we go to the instrument is exactly the same thing. I won't go into the shoulder and the head area, but that the left forearm is lending its support in this movable relationship with the head and the shoulder area, and that support system is nothing to do with, this part of my first finger or pushing up with the thumb. It's the entire thing with whatever happens to touching. So we have this amazing balance mechanism all the way through the playing system where the left forearm is able to lend its support and I'm able to play at the same time. So just a few things to wrap up this session. We have a winter symposium coming up, which is more in depth. It's actually 2 sessions on a Saturday and 2 sessions on a Sunday. I'm going to look at the dates so I don't say this wrong. February 25th and 26th. So the sessions will be on bow shaping. There's this just amazing movement in the right arm that not only gives us efficiency of movement, but it also enables us to make an absolutely gorgeous sound. So that's the theme for the Winter Symposium. We have a masterclass on Don Juan. That's the first session with a student from the Royal Northern College. Then we're going to be looking at fundamentals of bow shaping, particularly in Paganini 24. And then on the second day, we'll be looking at Don Juan in depth with bow shaping in mind. And then the last session will be working with inherited students. What we all are in this situation. We get students who are teenagers, who are coming in with all kinds of stages and ideas, and how do we work with them in a really constructive way. So please do come and join us for that. Please do send us information, ideas of sessions that you would like. This really is, it's for us all. So we'd love to hear from you. Questions are always welcome as well. And please stay in touch. Thanks for joining us.